How did you think the debate went? The numbers, just to kind of give the numbers for people that are watching this, the numbers came in on how many views it got. Debate ratings, only 12.8 million people watched it. 13 million less than Donald Trump's debut in 2015. Many will say a big part of that is because Trump and Tucker took a lot of views away when they did that Twitter X show together, Tucker X show together. But what was your feeling about the debate? We were right next to each other, so we saw the same thing.
Yeah, so if you look at all the punditry heading into that debate, the conventional assertion was that everybody was going to attack Governor DeSantis for the obvious reason that he's been depicted and held up forever as the only alternative to Trump. So if you're looking to move up in the polls and you believe the notion that DeSantis is the real viable alternative to Trump, you obviously want to take DeSantis down in order to replace him. None of that happened. I don't think DeSantis got attacked a single time. Not one person attacked. He was essentially ignored. He did a perfectly fine job. I think he's a very skilled speaker. He has a good message, all of that. Somehow when you put it all together, the sum is less than its parts. But I found it so notable that all of the attention instead got devoted to Vivek.
Oh, yeah.
Why? Why did they all go up there and decide to attack Vivek? Part of it, I think, is a genuine resentment. So like, imagine, you spent your career, you're like the governor, you've got elected to the Senate, you're the ambassador to the UN, you're the vice president of the United States, and some guy comes along that 4 months ago, no Americans had heard of. No one knew who he was.
Yep.
He's incredibly self-confident. Let's just use the positive sense of that term. You can call him kind of arrogant. He probably comes off that way to people who dislike him. He has an enormous amount of self-belief, and he's ahead of them all in the polls. That's why he was in that center position right next to DeSantis, while Nikki Haley and Tim Scott and Chris Christie are all off to the
Pence
side.
Is off
So a lot of it is obviously just like genuine personal resentment and anger, like there was toward Trump.
And they also have no relationship with him whatsoever.
Exactly, which is
like he's new on the scene.
And for that reason, he has no interest in creating any kind of personal favor. He loved the fact that they were attacking him. But I don't think it's just that. These are very professional politicians. They spend a lot of money on consultants. They're looking to go up onto that stage and perform strategically. They're not just there to vent whatever negative emotions they have. Obviously, there are things going on inside the polls. We see them a little bit publicly, but internally, and I've definitely heard this from lots of different people connected to various different campaigns, is that he is rising in the ways that matter much more precipitously than even is evident and visible in these polls, in the sense that people who are more politically engaged are starting to like him, which is one of the key metrics, because that then filters down to the people who are less engaged. They see him, obviously, as a greater threat to be the alternative to Trump than they even see Governor DeSantis as being, and that is amazing. And I think that what that shows is the transformational aspect we were talking about with Donald Trump. By far, the person most closely aligned with Donald Trump ideologically is Vivek. Yeah. And DeSantis is trying. DeSantis understands that there's no way to get that nomination if he's going to alienate the ideology that Trump has made the predominant ideology in the Republican Party. But Vivek is not even diluting it at all. So the fact that the only people who Republican voters seem to be willing to consider are the ones standing up and saying, I am an America first, populist, nationalist, and all of that comes with that. I'm going to wage a war on the CIA and the FBI. I want to defund the FBI. I want to deconstruct the permanent administrative. In Republican politics 10 years ago, that would have gotten you destroyed if you had uttered that unintentionally. Now, the only way to succeed is by making it a centerpiece of your campaign, which he has done. And the fact that kind of the one that even is most closely aligned with Trump ideologically is clearly starting to become the alternative to Trump shows how dominant that Trump ideology is within Republican Party politics.
Well, doesn't it come down to essentially what Pat's been talking about for months and months and months now, is that the establishment versus the anti-establishment? Like, just to give a metaphor. I just thought of this. Let's say there was a debate, but it was all the legacy media guys, right? You got Anderson Cooper there. You got Brett Baer there. You've got David Muir. You've just got Lester Holt. Typical legacy media.
Right.
And all of a sudden, center stage is Patrick Bet-David, host of the top-rated PBD podcast. And they're like, who the hell's this guy?
They're going after him.
Some
Easy.
tall, skinny brown guy, whatever, with a weird last name. Not exactly, Bet-David. But they're all like, who the fuck? And he's winning. Because he's telling it like it is. He's not exactly establishment, and he's just giving it to you raw and real. And that's essentially what Vivek is doing.
But that is the key. I've heard you say this before. I completely agree with you. Even like that Rachel Maddow quote about, my being the left's whatever. Left and right, I'm not saying it doesn't matter. It does matter. There's still issues where it's a reliable indicator of where somebody falls. But by far the more important metric is, do you regard American establishment institutions of authority as fundamentally trustworthy, reliable, and benevolent, or do you see them as deceitful, malignant, and entities that need to be destroyed? That anti-pro-establishment dichotomy is by far the most important political framework for understanding where someone's politics is. And both Vivek and Trump are clearly on the anti-establishment side of that. And I don't think any of the other candidates on that stage, including Governor DeSantis, even though he makes gestures toward it because he has to, is not really a credible anti-establishment figure. And I think the Republican polling is starting to reflect that.
It's the same reason why Bernie was a fan favorite of even people on the right in 2016, because he was not establishment. Because the public distrust in institutions is
why millions and millions of Americans twice voted for President Obama and then voted for Donald Trump, which makes no sense if you see the world through a left-right prism, obviously, but makes complete sense if you see it through an anti-establishment because Obama's appeal, fraudulent though it was I'm this skinny guy with this weird last name who hasn't been in Washington and has no
and I'm not a
investment
Bush.
in Washington. Right, I'm not a Clinton. I'm not a Clinton.
Yeah.
And
but he turned out to be
was
one,
his appeal.
basically.
Right, no, he was. It was fraudulent, of course. That was, but at least he had a credible claim to present himself as that. And you go back to Obama's 2008 campaign, and it was all about, we're going to radically change Washington.
Yeah.